excited to talk about my book again tonight for our book club, the INFJ user guide. I was just looking at Amazon, and I have to say thank you to 2 of you left reviews for my book on Amazon, and they are absolutely amazing, wonderful reviews. So I wanted to say thank you so much. If you haven't left a review yet over on Amazon, please go do that. It's so important and it means so much to me. And yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate it a lot. If you don't have a copy of my book yet, you can get it on Amazon. The paperback edition, which is what I have here, is on Amazon. You can also get the Kindle edition. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about chapter 4, which starts on page 24. It is about what it means to be feeling for INFJs, which is the 3rd letter in INFJ. A lot of people mistake what is the book about? The book's about being an INFJ. It's called the INFJ User Guide. It's about, it explains the specifics of preferences, which are INFJ. And it talks a little bit about my story of being an INFJ. And then it talks about functions. Because I know a lot of people tend to focus on functions now. It talks about, there's a chapter on strengths, one on weaknesses, one on communication, one about relationships, purpose, career, just kind of a general overview for INFJs. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about feelings, or what it means to have a feeling personality type. A lot of people mistake having a feeling personality type with being overly emotional, and especially outwardly emotional. When I was first learning about personality types, I made that mistake too. I've told you that I learned about my personality type through a test that I took when I was in college, and it didn't really give a very detailed explanation of what each personality type meant, and I really only read the explanation of what my type was. I didn't think to read any of the other types, so I really didn't know that much about it. And then that was 2012, and it was probably 2014, 2015 before I started digging into personality types more. And even then, I was mistyped as an INTJ. So I didn't really think that much about what it meant to have a feeling personality type. I just kind of made this assumption that, well, if you have a feeling personality type, then you must be really emotional all the time. And I associated that with big emotions that were outward displays of emotions, crying and angry and all of these things. And I don't like any of those things. And so to me, it was ooh, that must be terrible. I feel bad for those people who have feeling personality types. That must be rough. So I just really dismissed it. That's not me. I don't do that at all. So then in 2017, I was spending a lot of time with my niece, who was 13 at the time. And I started telling her about personality types, and she got really interested in it. And so then we started typing all of our family members and our friends. We figured out the personality types of all of our favorite boy band, the New Kids on the Block. We figured out personality types of people that we watched on TV, just because it was fun and we liked to talk about it, and we were spending a lot of time together. And then we kind of took it a step further, and anytime that we would get into a situation where there was a disagreement or there was something, unpleasant that was going on, it was okay, let's figure out what's really going on here. And so there was one time when my niece was having a disagreement with her grandma, and we were talking about what happened. And I was trying to tell her, I'm like, my niece is an INTP, so she's very analytical about things. She's very much facts and logic. And so I was trying to tell her, I'm like, listen, it's not about the facts and logic. It's about the fact that you hurt your grandma's feelings. You were correct in what you said, but the way that you presented it wasn't good, because it doesn't matter if you were right. What matters is that you hurt her feelings. And that's the problem here. And through that conversation, my niece was like, I don't think you have a thinking personality type. You have a feeling personality type, because I'm always focused on facts and logic and you're always focused on people's emotions. And my first response was like, oh, why would you say that? That is so rude. Like, I'm not one of those overly emotional type of people who just has feelings like coming out everywhere. That's gross. And I'm like, why do you have to be so mean to me? But once I kind of calmed down a little bit and I was like, well, okay, what does this actually mean? So I started digging into a lot more of what having a feeling personality type means. And I realized that having a feeling personality type, it doesn't mean that you have these huge emotions that are just out everywhere for everyone to see. It doesn't mean that you have like these crying fits or angry displays and things. It means that you have really deep feelings, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you express them all of the time. One of the things that I don't know why, this could come from some kind of trauma or anxiety or something. I don't know that it's necessarily an INFJ thing. Maybe you guys can tell me. I hide my emotions from people. And it's almost like I take pride in hiding my emotions from people. So whenever I get into a situation where I'm like about to cry, especially if it happens like at work, that's one of the worst things in the world for me. Like, I do not want to cry at work. So when I get in those types of situations, then I'm so focused on my face. It's like all of my attention goes into my facial features, and it's like I can almost see it from behind, like not just like what I'm seeing, but I can almost like see my face so that I can control all of the emotions on it, because I don't want people to know that I'm upset. And when I get angry too, I usually do that too. Like, I don't want people to know that I'm angry. I would rather process it myself and then maybe bring them in on it later if it's something that, if it's friends or family or something that they need to know about. So having a feeling personality type, like I said, it doesn't mean that you're overly emotional. It just means that you have very, very deep feelings, and you may not show them to people. I'm very stoic a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean that I don't have very deep feelings. I see a couple of comments that say yes. So that's good. You guys get it. You understand exactly what I'm saying. Okay, so I wanted to share with you a couple of paragraphs that are in the book. It's kind of like an explanation of the difference between feelings and emotions that I thought was really important, because a lot of times we use the terms interchangeably and they're not really the same thing. So I found this article that says how to measure emotions and feelings, that I quoted in the book, and it says, imagine this. You sprint through the airport on the run to catch your flight. While you try to make your way through the crowd of people waiting in line at the security check, you spot an old friend you haven't seen in ages. Before you can say anything, you tear up, overwhelmed with excitement, and you forget about your rush, while you give your friend a firm hug. Emotions are lower level responses occurring in the subcortical, I probably said that wrong, region of the brain, and are associated with bodily reactions that are activated through neurotransmitters and hormones released by the brain. Feelings are conscious experience of emotional reactions. Feelings are sparked by emotions and shaped by personal experiences, beliefs, memories, and thoughts linked to that particular emotion. Strictly speaking, A feeling is the side product of your brain perceiving an emotion and assigning a certain meaning to it. So basically, that means that emotions are triggered by a chemical and or hormonal change in your brain. They are something that's more temporary. So feeling, and that's emotions, right? While feelings are triggered by a part of your brain, by a different part of your brain, and they're deeper and more meaningful. Feelings are more a part of your personality, while emotions are a passing reaction to a low-level trigger, something like happiness or anger, something that you can move through rather quickly. You may not move through anger super quick, but you're probably going to move through happiness or irritation or rushing. You're going to move through that a little bit faster. So the emotions that we have, the feelings that we have, they're very deep. They're things that we think about a lot, and we spend a lot of time exploring a lot. And something else that are connected to those feelings for INFJs is our morals and our values. Those things that we hold really dear to us, we think about those a lot too. And it's very upsetting to us when people cross those morals or values, or they ask us to. There have been several times in my life where I've lost friends over things that really don't seem like that big of a deal. My older sister, when I was younger, my older sister was kind of like she was more interested in partying. She liked to go out to bars and flirt with guys, and she liked to date a lot. And when I was in high school, I was like extremely religious, and I had a very deep set of religious beliefs, and one of those things was that I didn't drink. And not only was that a part of my religion, but there are a long line of alcoholics in my family, and I watched my siblings become addicted to alcohol, and I've seen what it happens to, what it does to people. And so I was bound and determined that I was not ever going to drink alcohol. And so I went on a vacation one time with my sister, and she threw this massive fit because she wanted to go to a bar and she wanted me to drink and have fun with her. And she just made it like this huge thing. And for me, I was like, I'm usually very easygoing. You know, I'll go along with whatever makes everybody else happy and comfortable. But when it comes to certain things, like that was one of my things that was like, nope, this isn't happening. And I think, looking back, I think that it was such a massive problem for two reasons. One, because she always got her way. And the other thing was that I never said no to her. So because I was like this people pleaser who was always trying to make her comfortable and feel good, I never said no. So she didn't really have any boundaries. And so when I did stand firm and say no, it was a massive problem. It was like, you're not the person that I know. Why are you acting like this? And for me, because I was so young, I didn't understand that she didn't see that, like, this is one of the things that you can't push me on. And I never communicated that to her because I really didn't understand. Honestly, I didn't make that connection until probably about 2-3 years ago. I had this landlord who did the same thing. I was living in a studio apartment that was basically in her basement, and she didn't want a tenant. She wanted a daughter. So she would come into my apartment anytime that she wanted to, and she would go through my mail. She cleaned my house for me, which some people would think, hey, that's great, but that meant that she was going through my stuff, and she was doing it without my permission when I wasn't there. And I didn't want to be rude to her, right? And I wanted to make her comfortable, and I just kept telling myself, like, it's not that big of a deal, it's fine, it's not that big of a deal. But then the more that she did it, the more it added up, and I was trying really hard to be very pleasant to her, because I didn't want to make her mad. Well, then she finally crossed the line to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I found another apartment and told her that I was leaving, and she got really mad. And all of a sudden, nothing was okay. And, you know, she wanted to call me all kinds of names, and I was like, okay, that's how we're going to be? That's great. And so I flipped a switch like that. And I went from being nice and accommodating and sweet and kind to one of the nastiest people that I've ever been. I mean, she's like, I'm going to call a lawyer, and you don't want me to deal with a lawyer. And I'm like, fine, call a lawyer. I'll call a lawyer too, and we'll see who wins. And it turned into this really, really bad thing. And so I'm like telling my friends, like, can you believe this lady? Like, how can she act like this? And she keeps sending me these text messages like, you're not the person that I know, and I can't believe that you would act that way, and all of these things. And I'm like, I just don't understand why she's saying that. And other people have said that to me too, and I just don't get why they're saying that. And one of my friends, who I absolutely adore, her name is Shasha, she's like, Sarah, hello, duh, of course she's gonna say that to you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, you've been nice and accommodating and sweet and kind and, you know, like just like super polite to this lady. And then one day everything changed and you're like this nasty person to her. Of course you're not the person that you said that you were. You've been lying to her. And I'm like, oh, like, how did I not see that before? That makes total sense. I'm not the person that I told her that I was. Of course she's confused. I mean, that doesn't give her license to go through my stuff, and it didn't give her license to act the way that she was acting, but it made a lot more sense to me that, you know, I had told her that I was this one way, and then later it's like, oh wait, I've changed in just one day, like I'm a whole different person. Of course she's confused, right? It made a lot more sense to me, not only in that situation, but in so many other situations, because there's this concept of you teach people how to treat you, right? And I teach so many people how to treat me different ways, because as INFJs, we mimic other people's personalities, right? And we want to make them comfortable. And then it gets to that point where it's like, okay, hold please. You've gone too far. And now you get to see a whole different personality. There aren't that many things that can push me that far, but back to the story with my sister, pushing past a moral and a value for me is a really big thing. Okay, so I did want to touch a little bit on extroverted feeling. So what we've been talking about so far is the letters in our personality, which are INFJ. Those are called preferences, right? So the F is feeling. That's what we've been talking about. There's also another side to your personality that are called functions. And for INFJs, our second function is called extroverted feeling. So what that means is that we focus on other people's feelings. When we think about feeling, it's extroverted because that means that we focus on how everybody else feels. We want everybody else to feel comfortable before we think about our feelings, right? So just like with my sister, I wanted her to feel comfortable before I felt comfortable. It didn't matter to me as much if I was comfortable. This is also, like I said, we mimic other people's personalities. And part of that is because of our extroverted feeling. We want other people to be comfortable. We want them to be happy. And we're more focused on that. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it helps us relate to people. It helps us connect with people. It helps us to be able to take care of people better. It can also be a bad thing too, because we soak up other people's feelings and emotions, especially in times like the last year and a half when the world is going through a pandemic and there are so many people who are living in fear. There's a lot of anger going on. There's a lot of doubt, a lot of uncertainty. We can, if we're not careful, we can soak all of that up as well. And it's easy for us to get overwhelmed by all of those emotions. Even something just as simple as being around other people, like going to the grocery store. There are a lot of reasons that I don't like going to the grocery store, but one of them is being around other people and feeling their emotions. When you combine the extroverted feeling with our primary function, which is introverted intuition, it's this powerful combination where we can feel what other people are feeling, and sometimes we just know things about them. And like I said, it can be rough. I went to a concert last Friday at Fenway Park, and there was probably close to 40,000 people there. And I like those types of events because generally the mood is happy people, and they're all excited for the concert, and it's a good thing, so the mood is like all lifted up. It bothers me less being around a lot of people there, but you can still feel other people's emotions. You can still feel the annoyance of having to walk a mile from where you parked. You can still feel that some people have anxiety and there's still some irritation there. I said earlier I don't like going to the grocery store, and where I live in Boston, there's so many people that there's never a good time to go to the grocery store, like when it's not populated, when there's not tons of people in there. And there are a lot of different things, right? So when you go in there, there's a lot of people, and so people are annoyed because there's always somebody in your way, and every time you go down a different aisle, there's somebody else in your way. Sometimes there are people who are just angry and you don't really know why. Other times there are kids that are screaming. Sometimes there's long lines, and so there are people who are, irritated or angry by all of that. And so part of the grocery store for me is feeling all of those emotions too, right? I don't like all of the people in there. I don't like to have to wait in line. I don't like people being in my way. But then it's also feeling all of those things almost like radiating off of everybody else too. Once I realized that this is what we do, I've almost had to put up a block of, first of all, recognizing what's going on. That's the hardest part. It's ooh, I feel anxious. I feel like I'm not okay here. Why do I feel angry all of a sudden? Why do I feel like something's just not right? And then you start looking around and you see other people and you see those emotions in other people, and it's oh, that's where it's coming from. Okay. One of the things that you can do is separate yourself from those people. When you're in a close situation like that, though, you can't always get away from them quickly. But it helps to recognize what's going on and say, okay, I see that they're angry, but that doesn't mean that I have to accept that as my anger. I think about it in terms of a grocery store because I don't spend a lot of time around other people, especially since COVID. I live by myself, thankfully. And I don't go to the office anymore. So for me, it's where am I around other people? I grew up in a house that had almost 10 people in it. So there was always lots of big emotions. And there are several extroverts in my family who have to be seen and heard all the time. And I didn't even realize or understand how much of their energy I was soaking up and holding on to until I left home. And it took me a couple of years to even figure out who I was without everybody else, because I didn't have to worry about their emotions and their feelings and their problems and their, everything that they had going on. And it was a process of thinking about, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? Where did this come from? Does this even belong to me? I'm thinking about this. I'm stressing about this. I'm worrying about it. Does it even belong to me? Is it something that I even need to be thinking about? And it's a process to like sort through all of those emotions. And then when you get to one and you're like, you know what, this doesn't belong to me, then you have to be able to set it down and walk away from it. Because if it doesn't belong to you, there's no reason that you should be stressing about it. If there's nothing that you can do to fix it, if there's nothing that you can do to help, it's totally fine to walk away from it. This is part of our people-pleasing thing too that we have going on. A lot of us feel like because we can feel other people's emotions, that we can fix what's going on, that we need to fix everybody else, that we need to be involved, we need to figure things out for people, we need to help. There are ways that we can help. There are things that we can do. But it's important for us to find ways to help that don't take too much from us. Because you are just as important as everybody else in your life. That's a difficult thing to learn too. It feels selfish. And the people who have been taking from you will tell you that it's selfish too. But that doesn't mean that it is selfish, right? When you're on an airplane, when you first get on an airplane, and they go through all those safety rules, they tell you that if the oxygen masks come down, to put your oxygen mask on first before you help anybody else. Because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else, right? So it's the same with self-care and self-love, that if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of everybody else. There will be a point where you're like, I just can't do it anymore. Okay, the last thing that I have is about decisions. So, Myers-Briggs talks about the third preference, which is either thinking or feeling. This is how you make big decisions. People who make big decisions with facts and logic tend to be thinking personality types. And people like us make big decisions with a gut feeling. Like, we usually say, like, it just felt like the right thing to do, right? You hear me talk about Evan Carmichael a lot. He's an INFJ as well. And he says, make the big decisions with your gut or with your heart, and the small decisions with your head, which I agree with as well. This one, it gets a little bit tricky for us because as INFJs, we use both our thinking and our feeling. So we have the rational side. It's not like we just like completely discount being logical and rational. We have that ability and we use it. But in the end, we're most comfortable and most happy when we're making big decisions based on how we feel, based on including not only our feeling, but our intuition, really, that's telling us what the right thing to do is. When I moved to Boston, I tell this story quite a bit because it's true. When I moved to Boston, I was living in the Midwest. I really didn't have a lot of money because I had been laid off from my job a year and a half before that, and I had been unemployed for a long time and underemployed for a while too. So I didn't really have a lot of money, and I was in a position where I was like, well, I can move anywhere in the United States that I want to move. And that seems like a great position to be in, but it's also incredibly terrifying. It's like, okay, what's the right thing to do? for me, I wanted to be on the East Coast. And so I started looking at places on the East Coast, and I'm like, ooh, Boston sounds like a nice place. Like, I like places in the United States that don't feel like they're in the United States. Like New Orleans, it feels so much different than where I grew up in the Midwest. It doesn't feel like a part of the United States to me. I love New Orleans because I love the architecture and the whole French thing that's going on there. It just feels so much different that's what I was looking for. And Boston felt the same way. It feels more like Europe because there's a higher population density. The houses are a little bit different. Everything's sort of squished together and everything's really old. Like, there are towns here that were started in 1620, 1630, 1640, something like that. Old in the Midwest where I grew up is like 100 years old, not 300 years old. So, 400 years old, I guess. So when I was thinking about moving to Boston, I started doing research. Boston is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States, usually the second or third on the list. There's a high population density, the traffic is terrible, it's a big city, so crime is probably going to be worse than if you're living in a small city out in the middle of nowhere or a small town out in the middle of nowhere. I'd never lived in that kind of a big city before. There's this whole list of things that are like, yeah, this is probably not a good idea. And my parents are looking at this going, this is really not a good idea. And I was like, it doesn't make logical sense, but it feels like the right thing to do. And they're like looking at me like I have two heads. Like, what? It feels right? Like, what does that mean, really? I'm like, I don't know. It feels like the right thing to do. Like, my intuition is telling me this is what I need to do. It feels right. So when I tell people that's part of what feeling is, that really describes two things. That describes intuition, and that describes a feeling personality type. So when I tell people that and they're like, that doesn't make any sense, I'm like, oh, well, you probably have a thinking personality type. You might have a sensing personality type too. But if they get it, it's like, if you know, you know, right? If they get it, it's like, oh, you're one of us. You get it. All right, I see some comments. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I didn't realize how much energy I soaked up until a few years ago. It's a lot. It's really a lot. If you're not thinking about it, if you're not paying attention, it really is a lot. Grocery stores and shopping in general are really challenging. They are very, very challenging. Most people don't want to admit it, though. When you talk about it, a lot of people don't want to say, yeah, I soak up other people's emotions, or maybe they don't realize that they do that. Do you think that INFJ people might be highly emotional people more than others? I think it depends. There are a lot of different factors that go in there. One of the things I probably should have touched on that I haven't yet. When I was growing up, my parents always told me, don't be so sensitive. They said, you wear your heart on your sleeve. You always take everything straight to heart, and you shouldn't do that. And so for me, that was one of the things that made me feel like there was something wrong with me, like I was broken somehow. And that's not true. We can't change the way that we process emotions. We can't change the way that we feel things. You can lie to people. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm stoic about my emotions. Like I said, it might be trauma related there, because it's like, I can either tell you that I feel something, or I can't, or I don't have to. I can lie to you if that's what you want. So it could be. I see other people who express their emotions really, really well, and I envy those people. I tend to be attracted to those kind of people. I don't know if I feel like I can learn something from them, or if I'm just kind of in awe of them. But there's this other thing too, which is kind of a little deep. When I was growing up, I didn't feel like it was okay to be angry. If I was angry, then I was always told things like, you need to stop that. Stop acting like that. Or, we don't act like that. It was a problem if I was angry, right? If I was crying, if I was like sad and crying, that was totally fine. I could be like, that was acceptable. So nowadays, when I get really angry, I start crying. And it's not like I can control it. It's like there's this switch in my brain that flips and says, hey, you're really angry, you should start crying. And it's horrible because like there was a couple of years ago when I first moved to Boston, actually the first apartment that I lived in here, the heater wasn't working and it was like 30 degrees outside, and I was yelling at the maintenance guy because it was Sunday at 9:00 at night and he didn't want to come fix it because it was a long drive for him. And I'm like, I paid $2,000 a month rent. You need to get here, and you need to get here now. Like, this is not okay. And I was so mad that, like when you can just feel it, like you're so mad that you feel like you might have a stroke or something. And like, once I got to that point, like I started crying, and I'm like, oh, for pity's sakes, like I don't want to cry right now. I want to yell at this guy until he gets here. But yeah, I just realized that a couple of years ago too, where it was like, never understood why I did that. But that's why, if you don't feel like it's okay to be angry, then you'll switch to a different emotion. I feel like I battle with my rational side and my feeling side when making decisions. I feel like that too. And it feels like torture. It's like, especially like in moving to Boston, I tell that story like, oh, it was just such this easy decision. It was not an easy decision. It was like 6 months of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Like, do I want to pay $2,000 a month rent for a studio apartment? No. But do I want to live in Boston? Yes. Do I want to deal with massive traffic? And when I say massive traffic, like I didn't even realize the traffic until I lived here. You can't really. Until you drive that every single day, until you spend 3 hours in traffic trying to come home, you don't understand. You don't. And it's hard to pick up on vacation because you're not doing everyday things on vacation. You're doing the fun things. So going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it feels like torture. But I learned something recently that I absolutely love, and I'm going to share with you. You have to make a decision. I know it's super simple, right? But you have to make a decision. It doesn't matter what the decision is. Most of the time, it really doesn't matter. But the first thing is you have to make a decision. And the second thing is you have to make it the right decision. The overthinking, the torture that we do to ourselves is we don't know what the right decision is. And so we think that we can think about it enough to figure out which one is the right decision. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter if I lived in the Midwest or if I moved to Boston. Really, it didn't. I mean, I found a better job in Boston, and yes, rent is more expensive, but I also make twice as much money as I did in the Midwest. So it is more expensive, but you make more money. At the end of the day, it really didn't matter. I was still gonna, be healthy. I was still gonna do whatever I did for work. The only thing that stops the torture of overthinking is making a decision. So you just have to make a decision. And then the next thing is you make it the right decision. You stop questioning yourself. You stop torturing yourself. And you say, okay, I've decided. I'm moving to Boston, so now I need a plan. I'm going to be committed to it, and I'm not going to think about moving anywhere else. This is what I'm doing, and I'm going to make it work. That's the only thing that you can do. I mean, that's the best thing that you can do. That's exactly what I did before I even knew this thing. This cute little saying, which is make a decision and then make it the right decision. It's tough too. The second part is tough, especially when you're talking about something like that where your friends are going, "Are you insane?" And your parents are going, "You are ruining your life. Like, you're wasting tons of money and this is never going to work and nobody's ever going to hire you and you're going to be back here in like 6 weeks." But for me, that's kind of like more motivation. That's like, oh, you think this is the wrong thing to do? Okay, now I have to make it work. Now I'm definitely going to do it just because you told me not to. It kind of freaks me out a little bit when my parents are like, "Ooh, that's a good thing. You should do that." And I'm like, what? What do you mean it's a good thing? Like, hold on. I think I made a mistake somewhere. Let me rethink this. You agree with me? Really? Hold on. They never agree with any of my good decisions. I think a huge part comes down to mistaking the feelings and wishes of others for my own. Yeah, I've done that too. I did that with my parents for a long time. Whatever they wanted, that was what I did. And I thought, well, they're older than me. They must know what the right thing to do is, right? And I want to make them happy. Part of the people-pleasing thing, part of the keeping the peace, part of the putting their feelings ahead of my feelings. But thankfully, I outgrew that a little bit. Thankfully. All right. I see somebody bought a badge too. Is it Adriana? I hope I said that right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I think that's all I have for tonight. I'm gonna go. I'm doing a workshop about how to find your purpose, which I'm super excited about. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. Once again, I want to say thank you to everyone who left a review on Amazon about my book. If you haven't left a review yet, please go do that. I would really appreciate it. It helps so much. So yeah, thank you guys for hanging out with me. And I'll see you guys again next week. Same place, same time. Have a good weekend. So you just watched that video, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.